All right, welcome to the Organic Fitness Podcast with Coleman Power here. I have my latest guest here, all the way from San Fran. We have Kelly Ryerson. Say hello to the listeners.
Hi, everyone. Nice to be here.
Yeah, and I suppose I brought Kelly on, I suppose, with her area of expertise and her name being quite significant to what on Instagram, what she is, I suppose, an expert in her field. Kelly, if you want to tell the listeners a small bit about yourself and who you
Yeah.
are.
Yeah. So I write under the name Glyphosate Girl, glyphosate being the active ingredient in the herbicide Roundup. I say it's the most famous ingredient of the herbicide Roundup. I wouldn't say it's really actually the only active ingredient, but anyway, I found myself to this path of being named after a chemical for my pen name after I found out that a lot of my health problems were due to being gluten sensitive. And I had just a lot of just autoimmune like things, rashes, and just a boatload of symptoms that it seems like lots of people are getting these days. And when I went gluten free, I found out that that was triggering a great deal of my problems. And so I started digging and trying figuring out, okay, well, what has changed in grains so much that suddenly so many people can't tolerate it? And it has to be something pretty substantial. It has to be something pretty universal because it's happening, at least in the United States, across the board. And anytime I'm traveling, actually, I haven't been to Ireland recently, but when I'm in the UK, I see it's happening there. And so I learned that Roundup was being sprayed as a pre-harvest desiccant to dry out the grains before harvest. And I thought, well, what's that all about? You start digging and digging, you realize, okay, that is something very substantial has changed during the same time that this gluten intolerance has exploded. And that kind of opened up a huge kettle of worms because it goes far beyond just grains. But that was how I became Glyphosate Girl. I decided I was going to blog about it. The big cancer trials, the Roundup cancer trials were happening in San Francisco, which is close to, my house. And so I decided to go and start just reporting on them after I realized not very few people were reporting on this really important trial that it's the first time that Monsanto is ever going in front of a jury. So that seems pretty substantial given the legend of Monsanto and all of the chemicals. So I named myself Glyphosate Girl and started writing. And now here I am 4 years later, still talking about it.
I suppose that's a great way, I suppose, being in poor health than what you are currently today. What was the major changing point, and what was the kind of, oh God, I've completely have enough of the way I was feeling, and now I'm going to switch over to a more, I suppose, healthier lifestyle, eating more single ingredient foods that haven't been sprayed top to toe with harsh chemicals that are literally causing these major issues.
Yeah. Well, I didn't really have a choice. And I think that that's part of the problem is like a lot of people do have a choice to make that decision for themselves. And but for me, I was so sick and I had seen so many doctors that had no answers for me. And I was put on, 2 antidepressants because of course they thought maybe it was psychological, and steroids because I was inflamed and just, I had side effects to all these drugs. And it was to a point where I couldn't walk anymore, actually, in my case. Um, and yet I didn't have MS really, but they're like, well, you definitely have the autoimmune markers. And, now we're seeing such a huge epidemic of just autoimmunity in general, but that was very much me. And I actually finally went and saw a psychiatrist to find out, well, maybe this is psychosomatic because they're not finding anything. At this point, I'm so locked in with Western medicine that they're alternative medicine or nutrition wasn't even on my mind, which is crazy because I live in California, which is a very health conscious place, but I just felt like I lived a healthy life. So what else could this be? And so when I went and saw the psychiatrist, he actually ran blood work that went over basically like the core nutrients and vitamins and minerals that every live human being should have. And they came back so extremely deficient. And that was a big wake up call to me because, and actually I took those results to my primary care doctor, who by the way, was trained at Harvard and Stanford. Okay. So I took those results about the vitamins and she's like, that only means so much, the body has what it needs. And I'm like, so then I'm on Google, like, wait, I have no B12. Isn't that a big problem? And And yes, it is. In fact, I had no
Of your
C and
nervous
no
system.
D, and again, my nervous system was shutting down, like literally, like a third world starvation situation. And so at that point, I was like, and I learned about the glyphosate. I'm like, okay, I'm just going straight up food here, and I'm going to start just getting these organic ingredients. I am going to be making smoothies like crazy, so I can start pulling all these nutrients back into my body. And then upon learning that a lot of times even the organic food, at least in the United States, no longer has the nutrients that it needs, and I have to start supplementing as well. So now I live a very, very clean life. And it's lended itself to like my kids are so much healthier, my husband's healthier. So in many ways it's very much been a blessing.
It's a knock-on effect, and that point that you've touched on there is the fact that food is medicine, but getting the right type of foods for people is 100% key. Being short in vitamin B12 is one hell of a red flag for anybody.
It really is. And I don't know how much you go into methylation, but it turned out that I was MTHFR homozygous. So I really don't process folate well. And so I have to have like the activated B12 and the methylcobalamin. And and so that was another like big thing that went off my mind. Like, okay, so I really have to get that. I need to get this from food. I just need to go back to the basics and do what our bodies are meant to do with the food that's provided. So yeah, it's so important to get just that, like, the broad different ingredients too. So it's just not eating the same thing over and over.
Yeah, for diversity or gut, just to suppose to expand to the listeners a little bit, vitamin B12 is found in typically meat sources and or the likes of eggs. Will be another great food source for people to hit that from natural food source. You can also supplement on it, and you can also use for those on a vegan or vegetarian diet. There is nutritional yeast which would have additives of vitamin B12 in those. Are there any specific foods that you bumped up particularly to try and hit your B12 from natural sources?
Well, so I really got into liver actually.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how desperate I was, because I can tell I'm not a liver fan at all. And actually, since then, I've stopped eating beef and red meat. But at the time, it really helped to boost things up. So
It's one of those things that which is becoming more and more common offal, whether it be kidneys, whether it be the heart, and or they call it a nose to tail diet, is something that is becoming more popular. Why? Because meat has been demonized nearly for too long, and however that's not the case, and really being fair on farmers that do, I suppose, make a living from it. Sustainability is getting things local, it's getting things fresh, because without animals we actually cannot grow the fruits and vegetables that I currently do, or any individual who's doing their and trying to be, I suppose, more self-sufficient for themselves. We need those type of vitamins and minerals. Definitely not buying it from the likes of large pharmaceutical companies that buy and produce synthetic fertilizers which have negative effects on the soil health, but then inevitably have a negative effect on our health.
totally. Oh my gosh, I agree. And in fact, like this is a point of contention in my family because I always was a believer in eating, I still eat meats, but I had a experience at CAFO that was horrible. So those are the large facilities that are animal farms basically and prisons. And I was actually filming a documentary. And so it was a really cool time to go and film. Okay, here are the farmers that are harvesting this GMO corn. And then we saw them do that and then take the feed over to the animal factory and feed the cattle with this feed that is totally like a chemical bomb, right? And so I went over and I made eye contact with one of the like a cow that was really, really, really sick, like tons of mucus and like so many drugs, and it made me so sad and everything. And I felt like I had an agreement with him that like, okay, I won't eat cows anymore. But I know you're gonna say right now, and I know there's a difference that between that and like the really sustainable way of you need the grazing, and I actually totally get that. So I don't know whether I'm going to get over that agreement I made at that time.
No, it's right. It's a great point. Okay, but as soon as we realize that for life to happen, there has to be some sort of a death. And I'm no nor vegan, vegetarian, or for green team, for the blue team, or the red or the blue. It's for people to pick a diet that helps them to thrive, because too many
Totally.
people don't understand foods enough, and they join the camp of somebody who doesn't eat meat, and it puts them in a compromised situation. So we'll take the example of someone who is demonizing meat for whatever reason, religious beliefs, and or because they joined a tribe or a cult or a diet culture. What ended up happening is then they put themselves in poorer health as a result of that. So they lack
Absolutely
vitamins
true.
and minerals. They are not being their best because they, I suppose, restrict themselves, and restricting foods without understanding the whole process. And it's technical, but as well, it's quite simple. But the thing is, wherever your information is at, it's to be clear on how foods affect the body.
Totally. And I will say that that beef liver was a big component of my healing. I mean, it's just a natural source, is a natural way to get it and restore my body. That and bone broth, another super healing thing for my totally messed up gut.
For
So
your
there's
gut,
definitely a place for it. Yeah.
yeah, for your gut line, bone broth, and is one of those things that should be definitely consumed for people who are going to eat it or drink it, depending on their, I suppose, method of consuming it, because it lines that gut. And when you do that, it's most certainly great for your immune system. 70% of your immune system located in your gut. No wonder you're starting to and do see the benefits from that.
Oh yeah. All through COVID, I was thinking everyone should just be sipping bone broth. Let's protect
Yeah,
ourselves.
that will be essential. And are there any other fermented foods that you add into your diet?
I did a little bit of kombucha, but for whatever reason, it doesn't really sit well with me. So I couldn't do it for long term. I'm one of those people. I only meet it's like 1 out of 10 people I ever talk about kombucha with. They're like, yeah, I don't know. I'm like, oh.
They don't
But I
like
do.
it.
I did. Then I found a great probiotic actually, and which I chose specifically because it counteracts the effects of glyphosate in like a clinical study. I was like, okay, well, that really makes sense. And you can start rehabilitating that good bacteria specifically and stop the potentiation of this negative, like pathogenic bacteria that somehow has learned to thrive in the presence of glyphosate.
Mm, and I'd like to even rein it back just a little bit. Do you know that documentary that you made? Is there a place that we could most certainly, and the listeners and the viewers could get their hands on that to see it for themselves?
Well, hopefully it will be out in the next year. It's not out yet. It's a
Very good.
lot of editing to do because this glyphosate story is so enormous. It goes from the political beginnings of why we even have chemical agriculture, and then what are the health effects, and then there's just so much tied up. And I always say that poison is nonpartisan, and this GMO chemical issue has nothing to do with like either political party. And so it bothers me actually a lot when people are like, oh, that at least the United States Democrats, they're all for environmental health and the environment and blah, blah. And I'm looking and I see, okay, they're the Clintons, like in love with Monsanto and do everything they can to support their chemical, so it is not Democrat or Republican issue. But anyway, digging through all of that and you try and figure out how to deliver it in a way that is right takes time. So hopefully in the next year.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Things don't happen overnight. That's
No.
for sure. I want to even, I suppose, tell the listeners a little bit about, I suppose, the history of glyphosate, where it first originated from, and your knowledge on that.
Yeah. So glyphosate was originally used as a metal chelator and was used to clean metal pipes in an industrial situation because it was so great at binding, chelating, that means binding minerals and out of these pipes so that they can function again. And so it worked beautifully there. And then in the late 60s, early 70s, scientists realized, oh, this has great potential as an herbicide as well, because it shuts down a key pathway that plants need to survive and create energy, called the shikimate pathway.
Isn't that such a hard word, the shikimate pathway?
Yeah, it is. It must be the most famous pathway too.
I love that. That's so funny.
The good old shikimate. So they discovered that, and then Monsanto patented it as an herbicide and put it into use as the herbicide Roundup in 1974, and was released on the market around 1976. And it was just used in the beginning, sort of here and there, as spot treatment in landscapes and in agriculture, and actually used similarly to the way it's now currently used in vineyards, but you couldn't spray it on a crop because it would kill the crop, not just the weed. So then Monsanto was going to lose patent on their Roundup product in 2000. And so they decided they needed to come up with like a way to continue to sell it and make the profits off of it. And so they developed launched in 1996, the GMO seeds. So the GMO Roundup Ready corn and soy and cotton were launched, and Roundup Ready meaning that they were resistant to Roundup's effects. So farmers could go and spray the crop and the crops wouldn't die even as they were spraying it to kill the weeds around the crops. So that led to the explosion in use of Roundup. I mean, it's just insanity. And just the quantities are just huge. And in the early 2000s, although like I think actually in Scotland, they started doing it in the late 90s, but in the early 2000s in the US, they started using it as a pre-harvest spray to dry out grains and chickpeas and sugarcane and a lot of crops. It's kind of horrific. And so now you have a lot of residues in food. It's estimated that 80% of dietary exposure to glyphosate actually comes from this pre-harvest spray. So if you think if you could change a farmer's practices back to not use that as a harvest aid, then we would just have a dramatic drop off in our dietary exposure. So that's something that I work a lot on doing. And specifically like glyphosate, it has so much published research out there about the harm. I mean, the harms from this chemical are so astronomical, and they're always hidden by regulators and of course the wealth of the pharmaceutical industry. I say pharmaceutical because now Bayer owns Monsanto. So they bought up the agricultural chemical company. So now they own the food and the medications to help treat what issues they're causing. And just the list goes on. So the most famous right now is that it's causing non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And that's what all of the big Roundup trials are about. But it actually, I came to it because of the gut disturbance and it is a patented antibiotic now, and so it definitely gets into the gut biome and really creates this situation of dysbiosis and leaky gut. But I think like what I've been really focused on recently, because it just, I don't know, it seems like it's from some horror film, is the endocrine disruption component of it. I actually ended up I was wondering, because it's in a lot of bodily fluids, I was wondering if it actually is in semen as well. And so I had 3 people send samples in to a lab to see if glyphosate is present in semen just in a normal diet. And indeed, in all 3 cases, it came back positive. And then since then, actually, a study was shown. I mean, I guess I'd already sort of proven it with that sample. But anyway, the glyphosate crosses the blood testes barrier and gets into the sperm and causes early sperm death. And so, and like lower motility. And so you couple that with the rising levels of infertility that are so like people, oh, they just don't want to have more babies. Well, no, people are becoming infertile as they've been eating this chemical. And it's so just incredibly disturbing to me. And then another study that came out was that they tested a bunch of pregnant women in their second trimester for glyphosate levels in their urine. And then they measured the distance between the anus and the vagina in baby girls that were born to these moms. And they were able to track that the moms with the higher levels of glyphosate in their urine in the second trimester also had baby girls with a longer distance between the anus and the vagina. And that's androgenization right there. And so that is like literally signaling, okay, Mother Nature does not want us to be procreating in an environment with glyphosate in it. And I don't know what it's going to take. Like it feels very doomsday. And I mean, there's so many of us that are trying to get, in fact, I went with a group called Moms Across America, and we went to the EPA and we presented all of this evidence with scientists and, gave it to them. And they said, well, this is anecdotal. And there's nothing anecdotal about it. I mean, it's libraries of endocrine disruption from this. And so I don't know how they wake up in the morning and they like go to work and feel good about themselves, because it's like literally killing the species, and not just humans, it's all the animals that are exposed to it. So Anyway, that's what is really disturbing me a lot right now.
Yeah, it's a crazy world that we're living in, really and truly, Kelly. And as I sit here, and people will say, do you know what I mean, for improved health, or sorry, that they can sell a product that literally kills small little beneficial weeds. And the definition of a weed is a plant in the wrong place. I'm drinking dandelion tea, which I literally went out to the garden, picked the dandelion from the like in between the grass and the patio, popped it into the likes of a cup, added hot water. That's 100% free. That's literally benefiting my beneficial gut bacteria, because the natural prebiotic, it's high in that type of fiber called inulin. And yet then when we need to get more people on this kind of, I suppose, a health buzz of either getting their own foods that are not, I suppose, harshly sprayed, because it's killing us from the inside out.
It absolutely is, and in a secret, quiet sort of way that isn't very obvious. And so, until you really, you're writing a book on organic living, and you're naming, or in my case, naming myself Glyphosate Girl, it's hard to understand the full impact of it.
Yeah, until you're actually in the thick of it, or in get your hands dirty and look at it,
Yeah.
open up your eyes to what's actually happening. And the more people can get single ingredient foods for themselves, whether they're growing their own or they're buying it, it's going to be so key for long-term health of not only ourselves but the generations that are coming ahead of us and the planet. We're only here for a short period of time, but it's supposed to get people on this trend of doing their best, because it used to, like as we said, this what didn't always happen. It's whoever big large companies such as the likes of Monsanto are supplying the farmers with this and telling them that there's no effects on people's health. And it most certainly is. The whole idea that it's only anecdotal evidence, that's absolutely crazy in my eyes for people to say that.
It is so crazy making. And we're really upset here in the United States because a court finally ordered the re-registration of glyphosate was coming up on October 1st. And so we've all been waiting and wondering what's going to happen because there's so much evidence about the damage of it. And actually a court ordered the EPA to go back and reassess glyphosate and look at actually all the evidence that it's a carcinogen, because even the judges look, the federal judges look like, this is bad, like this is not good, you guys haven't done your job. They sent them back. And now the EPA, instead of redoing it, said, we're just going to ditch the whole re-registration process, and we're going to take the next 3 to 4 years and start looking at all the evidence again. I mean, obviously it's just a delay. And so I don't know what it takes. And so then I'm like, well, how do you make them do it? You can't really send the military into the EPA, I guess. I don't know how you make them change it, Like, you guys are so illegal right now. You cannot poison us like this.
Yeah, and what most certainly yourself and anyone else would be in the same boat, trying to inform people that the foods that you eat have a massive effect on the way you look, you feel, and how much energy levels you have. Like mental health and depression is on the rise, and that's
Oh, yeah.
and why? Because the gut is linked to the brain. There's that vagus nerve. 90% of your serotonin is produced in your stomach across the blood-brain barrier. And if more people ate foods that they could get or either grow themselves or go to country markets, that's the solution. Go to the farm or go straight to farm gate. There's so many different places where you can do it. Don't say you can't, say you will. And literally you are living proof of that.
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree. And I think and I always wonder, okay, how can you make someone feel how good it feels when you're actually healthy? Because I think people don't know until then you feel it. You're like, oh my gosh, life is beautiful. Like, wait, this is how we're supposed to feel, right?
I love you just how you said that. Yeah. A lot of people say, oh God, would you just live a little and have such and such a takeaway that's literally potatoes or heavily sprayed crop that have seed oils in them again, which is caused with high inflammation in the body. And people actually don't realize how good and how much energy levels you can have when you start to eat better foods for yourself.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And you're so right with the serotonin then, cranking up down there like it's supposed to when the biome is happy. Like, that's a good feeling. And I mean, I look forward to, I used to think, oh, who are those people that go to the farmer's market? Because I wasn't one of them. Now I'm at the farmer's market every Saturday, so excited with my basket and everything. It's probably annoying to people that aren't into it, but I feel good.
Yeah, well, do you know what I mean? I'm a firm believer in sometimes you have to, I suppose, you can't be everyone's cup of tea, but you're somebody's shot of whiskey.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, because look, I used to do it too. Like, and I didn't grow up in a family that went to the likes of country markets or did extremely extremely self-sufficient. But now I'm supposed the complete other end of the spectrum. I go there, yeah, with my either basket or bag I typically bring after I do a bit of a workout, load up on stuff, and literally can bring it to family members who don't get the opportunity to go there themselves. Like, it's a community, and it's often in Ireland we have the likes of live bands, which is like just literally a couple of lads on the guitar playing a bit of music. It's a community. It's unreal. It's so cool. Like, literally, I love it. It's just,
oh my gosh, I'm so with you. And those people are so happy because they're feeling really good.
We're giving off good endorphins because they're probably just eating and munching on a raw carrot, which is unbelievably good for your gut health and actually binds toxins that can end up passing out through your stool. Like, these are just simple things, but
it's huge.
Simple but huge. I'm so glad. Kelly, the two of us are massively energetic and passionate about this. We're trying to get it across here. I hope this two of us are just laughing. Serotonin is like at 100% here now.
Oh my gosh, it's feeling really good. I'm so excited to munch on that carrot in a little bit.
I definitely gotta have carrots tonight, that's for sure. I'm gonna leave it as podcast episode. Make sure you get your organic carrots at the country market.
Totally.
Oh, this is too funny. So, but I think that's a classic way to kind of finish it up. But I want, Kelly, you to tell the listeners where is the best place for them to contact you directly, so they can either get information off you or work with you in, I suppose, any of the programs or services you do provide.
Oh yeah, so you can find me. So my website is glyphosategirl.com. And I'm actually be launching a new site there in November with a lot of data and just like research. So when you want to do a project or like give a talk on glyphosate, it'll just be there for you. And then let's see, then I'm on Instagram at glyphosate girl.
Well, I'm putting all those in the likes of the show notes. And Kelly, thanks so much for the laughs. Thanks so much for the information. And I love ending these podcasts by saying, stay tuned, stay classy, and keep it organic.